All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your, uh, I don't know, like your sixth or seventh biology class. Today we're going to be talking about we're going to be reviewing concepts from section 1.5 entitled Biology and Your Future. So I'm going to share my whiteboard, and what I want to do is pretty much summarize what was discussed in class and highlighted, and if there are any important key terms, I'll write them here on the board. So, today's topic was biology and your future, and we started off um, by discussing how basic knowledge of biology can actually help better a quality of life. And we talked about various aspects of it. We talked about how it relates to pollution or how it relates to health and other aspects. So I'm actually going to start reading one of the highlights. And in the book on page 24, if I'm not mistaken, um, one of the concepts or one of the sentences that were highlighted and we discussed in class said, your knowledge of biology can help you make informed decisions about issues involving endangered species, biotechnology, medical research, pollution control, to name a few. So, knowing basic aspects of biology will help us understand areas such as health, uh, medical research, and why is that? Well, even though we're going to see this a little bit further on in the section, but for example, having a basic knowledge of biology can help you choose a healthier lifestyle in terms of what we eat or what kind of products we use. Biotechnology, I think one of the, and again we'll mention it later on, but one of the earliest examples of how biotechnology has affected our understanding of biology was, of course, the development of the microscope. So going on or continuing on that page, where it says, I'm in the section that says biology and your health. And again, all I'm doing is just reading the most important concepts of the section, and hopefully this will help you guys out with what you need. It says, what you eat and drink is directly related to your health, but you may not think twice about the possibilities of contaminated food or water, or a lack of vitamins in your diet. Not long ago, diseases caused by vitamin deficiencies were still fairly common. Okay, so once again, I'm going to read it. It says, what you eat and drink is directly related to your health, but you may not think twice about the possibility of contaminated food or water, or a lack of vitamins in your diet. Not long ago, diseases caused by vitamin deficiencies were still fairly common. So, for example, understanding or having a key knowledge of biology of what we eat that helps us stay healthy um, is very important, and it is important because, for example, up until less than 100 years ago, and I mentioned in class today that about 85 years ago, more or less, was when the first commercial multivitamin was released in the 1930s. And up until less than 100 years ago, it was very common to find people who had diseases that had to do with vitamin deficiencies. And it was because up until about maybe less than 100 years ago, vitamins weren't, there wasn't a lot known about vitamins. In fact, our body produces very few, if any, vitamins. So around the time, the early to mid 30s, the first commercial multivitamins were developed. And nowadays, doctors highly recommend vitamins. So that's an example of how knowing biology or having a common small understanding of biology will help. It says the first vitamins were identified less than 100 years ago, but today the vitamins found in foods are printed on labels. And, it goes on to tell us that there were diseases that affected or that weren't discovered until the 1980s, which was maybe less than 30 years ago, or excuse me, a little bit over 30 years ago. And it goes on to mention that one of the diseases discovered in the 1980s was what was known as mad cow disease. And this was, of course, a disease that affected cows, and it had economical repercussions because people who had farms that breeded cows and who got infected with these diseases had to unfortunately get rid of the cows, and that was a bit of an economical impact in that sense. And another concept that we highlighted was many people suffer from severe, even life-threatening allergies to foods such as peanuts and shellfish. So the book actually goes on to tell us that having a common understanding of biology affects our health in the sense of food allergies. Having a common understanding of biology will help us identify what foods cause us allergies. And some of those allergies can be very mild, or some of them can be very life threatening. So, just having an understanding of biology helps us know what foods, for example, could be harmful to us or to someone that we know just because of allergies. And I even said in class that some the study of allergies actually helped develop a branch of medicine where we have doctors that are allergists, certain types of doctors that specialize in allergies, right? Or diseases that cause allergy as well. And the last thing that we mentioned was that biology can help you better understand all of these health related issues. So, again, this paragraph, we know that biology helps us understand or helps us develop better eating habits. So, we can say that biology, based on this information, helps us develop better eating habits, or more conscientious. It makes us more conscious of what we eat and how we supplement ourselves. Okay, and then in the next page 25, it says an understanding of biology on many different levels, genetic, chemical, and cellular, for example, can help you make any number of lifestyle choices that affect your health. Okay, so a common, we can say that a common understanding of biology can help us make better lifestyle choices. Okay? Help us make better lifestyle choices. Now, what I mean by help us make better lifestyle choices is, for example, um, understanding that, for example, cigarettes can not only cause cancer, but can also lead to heart disease, or understanding that abuse of illegal substances, or uses rather of illegal substances, can affect your health in a number of ways. So, having a better understanding of biology can actually help us kind of um, understand or help us make better lifestyle choices. For example, exercising. And I was mentioning in class that having this basic knowledge can help us understand the importance of exercising or carrying a balanced diet. And I was explaining that in our bodies are kind of like this physics principle that says, that what goes up eventually must come down. um, and what that means is that, as we when we're younger and we're in top physical peak, and then there comes a point, biologically speaking, in which our body kind of begins to go the opposite direction. And having this basic understanding can help us understand that exercising and having a proper diet or making certain lifestyle choices can help us, well, not um, it won't delay us getting any older, but it can help our bodies maintain at least a physical peak condition while that process happens. So, the other thing that we talked about on page 25 is a study that was, or how common knowledge of biology helps us understand our environment. And this topic, it says biology and the world around you. And they go on to talk about a situation or a case study that happened in Minnesota in 1995 when a group of school children were in a local pond searching for frogs for a biology or a science class that they have. And when they were looking at the pond, they found that a lot of frogs were had deformities. They either had missing eyes or they had extra legs, and they found these weird things that were going on. And of course, they informed that, and they tell us, or the story goes on to say that you know scientists started to investigate the phenomenon, and they wanted to know if there was a parasite that was causing these malformities, or if there were any predators in the area, or any chemicals in the area that affected the frogs. They hypothesized that it could have been caused by parasites, because in other parts of the US they had found that certain parasites had actually caused deformities, or malformations in the frogs. So it was actually thought that those same parasites that were found in another state might actually have been found in that lake in Minneapolis or in Minnesota. And years later, they actually scientists went and investigated, and they thought to themselves that maybe it wasn't so much a parasite, but it could have been a chemical from a nearby factory. So the case study goes on to mention, well, what kind of impact is that going to have? Is this chemical harmful to humans, or do I need to close down the factory? So what this case study is trying to tell us is, and this is what I'm trying to get at, is that understanding biology, or basic biology in terms of our environment, or what surrounds us, can help us understand what actions we need to make. Because if in fact it was chemicals that caused the malformations of those frogs, the question that would arise is, one, is this chemical harmful to humans? Two, if it is harmful to humans, how do we solve it? Do we close the factory? Do we regulate them? Three, if we have to close the factory, how's that going to affect the town's economy? How's that going to affect people's economy? So you can see how having a common understanding of biology helps us know, or helps us have a better understanding, is what I'm trying to get at, of our environment. And we highlighted this in class, and it says that these are the types of questions that people try to answer every day. And it goes on to say, biologists and other scientists research environmental issues such as pollution, biodiversity, habitat preservation, land conservation, and natural resources. Okay, so it says that biologists helps or study these phenomenons, but of course the decisions on whether, going back to the case study, on whether we close down the factory or we shut down the town, it's not a decision that is solely based on biologists, but other people, people in the area, townspeople, or politicians, or the government, or other agencies are also responsible for making these kinds of decisions. So that's why it's so important to have a common understanding of biology. And then we go on to page 26. And on page 26, they talk about biotechnology. Okay, and it says biotechnology offers great promise, but also raises many concerns. So it actually goes on to define first what biotechnology is, and it says biotechnology is the use and application of living things and biological processes. It says biotechnology includes a very broad range of product, processes, and techniques. Okay, so I'm actually going to write the definition of biotechnology. It says, is the use and application. So we'll say that biotechnology, I'm just going to abbreviate it as biotech. Okay, but biotechnology is the and application of use and application of living things and biological process of living things and biological processes. And some of the applications of biotechnology, and if you guys give me 1 second, I can look real quick so I can actually see if I can write them right about. Actually, right down here. Give me 1 sec, guys. So, some applications of biotechnology um, are in a range of products and techniques. Okay, so we use biotechnology in the development of products and techniques. Okay, it says, in fact, some forms of biotechnology have been around for centuries, such as the use of microorganisms to make bread and cheese. So, biotechnology can be applied in food preparing. An example, the use of microorganisms to make bread and cheese. Not just that, they're used in fermentation processes, which is a very old process that used to be used in ancient civilization, and in some cases are still used to make wine. And they use yeast, which is a type of fungi. So that's an example of biotechnological application. We have other uses of biotechnology have been in the field of crime investigation, or CSI, where through DNA testing, people have that were framed for crimes that didn't commit were later revealed to be innocent after studying DNA. And um, the search for alternate energy sources. Okay, so that's another application of biotechnology. Search of alternate energy sources. Okay, so those are examples of some of the areas in which biotechnology can be applied. All right. I'm actually going to go ahead and clear all the drawings and we're going to move on. It says benefits and biological risks. And I'm actually going to go ahead into the definition, and it says that organisms that have genes from more than one species or have altered copies of their own genes are called transgenic. So I know that's a mouthful, so let me see if I can write that down. Organisms that have genes from one, excuse me, from more than, I'm sorry, more than one species or have altered copies of their own genes or have altered copies of their own genes are called transgenic. Now, so you guys have an idea when I mean transgenic, I'm basically saying an organism in which their own genome or DNA has been altered, or they have added the DNA or genome of other species. One of this, for example, is how we use bacteria to produce human insulin. What they do is they take a strand of gene of the bacteria, and let's see if I can actually draw it out. So when that occurs, is well, we'll have a bacteria, and let's see if I can draw bacteria here. Give me 1 second, guys. More or less, let's just assume that a bacteria looks something like this. Although that's not necessarily true, right? And the bacteria, if it's a single-celled organism, has a copy of the DNA here. So what they do is the DNA is a double helix structure, okay? It's kind of like a ladder. So what they do here, let me see if I can use another color to illustrate the point that I want to make, and they'll take a strand of the DNA, like they'll literally just cut a strand off. Like let's say they use enzymes, which are molecules that catalyze a reaction. Anyway, they'll cut off a strand of that DNA, and let's say now that little ladder has actually one, right? Instead of having two, it has one. Okay, it has one. Like they literally cut it off. It's a much more complicated process than this, but I just want you guys to know the idea. And they cut them off, and then they'll take the sequence for human insulin, and let's assume it's this sequence right here, right? They'll take this sequence right here, and they'll kind of glue it to these three right here. So they'll take the sequence that produces human insulin, and they'll put it together with this one right here. And what their science biologists are doing is now making that bacteria actually produce human insulin. And that's an example of how biotechnology helps, and how we're altering the copy of the DNA of the bacteria and actually including human DNA there as well. Okay, so that's an example of a transgenic organism. And of course, you guys have heard about like GMOs or genetically modified food, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But that's another example of transgenic as well. So um, it says organisms, and it also says transgenic bacteria, just like I was explaining, can be used to make human insulin to treat diabetes. Now, before that process, what they would do was they would get the insulin from the pancreas of the cow or pigs, because they had similar insulin to that of human beings. All right. And it talks about the benefits and the risks of biotechnology. Now, I'm actually going to go ahead and read it because it talks about the benefits and ethical considerations. So, this is actually on page 26, and I'm not going to write the whole paragraph because I told you guys in class to kind of like make an asterisk next to it, but I am going to read it. It says another form of biotechnology is human genetic screening, which is the analysis of a person's genes to identify genetic variations. Genetic screening can indicate whether individuals or their potential offspring may be at risk for certain diseases or genetic disorders. It says genetic screening has the potential for early diagnosis of conditions that can be treated before an illness occurs. So, of course, we have genetic screening, and let's see if I can illustrate what I'm trying to explain or what that paragraph says. So, again, we'll go with our DNA structure, and we know that is a let me change that. Our DNA structure, we know it is what we call a double helix molecule, or like because in reality the DNA is spiral. It's not straight out like the way I'm drawing it, making it look like a ladder, but just for the illustration purposes. Now, they look like little steps of a ladder, but in reality, these are they're called codons, and they have a specific sequence. Now, a specific sequence of DNA is kind of like a cheat code in a video game. If you press a certain code, it'll make something happen. Well, same thing with DNA. It's kind of like a code, and that code is what helps a molecule be formed that can lead on to other things. Now, in terms of human beings, because we know, or in 2003, the Human Genome Project, which we're going to mention in a little bit, was finished. We know that every arrangement of the or the excuse me, the nitrogen bases or the codons, right, makes something happen. So genetic screening is the process of analyzing one's DNA and performing tests to see if a person will eventually suffer from cancer or have heart diseases or anything like that, right? And it's kind of like, it's called gene mapping as well. It's literally like taking all these codons and just see what each sequence means, and then see, well, this person can be pre-diabetic, or this person can develop cancer, and it can even help in the developmental of genetic therapy to combat cancer. There's a bunch of applications. However, we have to understand that genetic screening also raises some kind of concern. And I mentioned in class that genetic screening can also lead to a new type of discrimination. We know that there are forms of discrimination that unfortunately exist in our world, and some scientists and other experts are concerned that this understanding of genetics may cause another type of discrimination. Another question is, who should have the power to determine, what to do? And I remember mentioning in class a movie, a very old movie, about 20 somewhat years, that actually kind of poses this situation. The movie's in a futuristic world where we all know, or we can analyze everyone's genes. And when a baby's born, doctors will take a sample of their DNA and run it through tests, and all of a sudden determine, well, this person, he'll develop cancer or heart disease and die, estimated death at whatever age. And people who are born with those genetic disorders or conditions, or who may develop those conditions in this movie, in this futuristic world, are actually set to live, underprivileged lives. They get the worst jobs. They have access to the worst resources. So a lot of scientists are concerned that genetic screening can, in fact, at some point, generate this kind of discrimination. And it goes on, or I go on to the last page of the text, and it's two very important data that we need to know. And number one is that the structure of DNA was described in 1953, and by 2003, the entire human DNA sequence was known. So genetics, or biology itself, it's a relatively evolving science, which is the difference between biology and most other science, is that biology is constantly changing. So important days is that in 1953, DNA was described, and it was described by two scientists named Watson and Crick. And these gentlemen were the first people, let me retype that, were the first people to actually study DNA, to actually study or describe this structure, which is kind of like this ladder thing that I was explaining. They were the first two to actually say, well, DNA looks like this. Although we knew that DNA existed way before that, these were the persons who actually, the people, excuse me, who actually described what it looks like. And the other important date is that by 2003, the entire human genome, the entire human genome sequence was known. So understand, guys, that within a difference of 50 years, we went from, or scientists went from describing what DNA looks like to knowing all of the secrets or all the sequences of human DNA. And that was referred to as the Human Genome Project, which ended in about 2003, 2004, more or less. It was a project that started in 1998, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, if you have any doubts with those dates, you can check up on Mr. Google or whatever web browser you use, and you guys will see, the exact dates. And it goes on to once again raise these ethical questions. You know, who has the power to understand gene sequencing, or it goes on to say that there are questions that have been asked that we don't know the answer to, or there are even questions that haven't been asked. Some biologists propose that there are areas or depths within the sea that we have not yet discovered, and that there could be other creatures lurking there that we don't even know. A lot of people, and again, have gone into the urban myth of the Loch Ness monster, and of course, although the majority of the signs point to that not being true, what is true is that that does lead to questions such as, are there other creatures that I don't know that live in this world, or is there life on other planets, or can other planets support life? So understanding biology generates all these questions. And the last thing that we said is that a huge number of questions in biology are not just unanswered, they are unasked. Okay, because biology is constantly evolving, because biology is a study of life and living things, and life never stops or stays still, especially in the reality that we're living in now with this whole pandemic. There are questions that are asked or and not answered, or there are even questions that haven't even been asked and we don't know the answer to. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is it for section 1.5. I hope this video helps, and we'll see each other in our next class. So, bye-bye.